what was the conversation like with your partner in terms of, you know, then taking the next step towards sperm donation?
Mm. So those conversations started after the first operation, the varicocele embolization, because I hit
Right.
rock bottom, and when you're at rock bottom, there's only one way you can go, um, and
That's the best thing about being at rock bottom. You can only
yeah,
go up.
yeah, exactly. And I remember that feeling of I felt like I was in a pit, and that's when I started asking those hard questions of myself, and not necessarily being able to answer them, but then asking my missus, and like it gives you that again. I used the analogy earlier, but it's like that seed, and it starts to grow, and you start looking at things like like those character traits, realizing that actually they can be passed on in like through nurture. And then I started looking at my own family makeup, and it's funny because it's not funny, but funny. But this is 2.5 years, well, 1.5 years past diagnosis, 2.5 years after starting, but trying. You realise the answers are often closer than you realise at first. So, for example, and this is not going to be the norm for most people, but my granddad on my dad's side wasn't my biological granddad. And because a generational thing, this is quite rare back then for my nan to have got divorced and remarried. He raised my dad and his two brothers from when they were kids. He was married to my nan before I was even born, but I was raised in the knowledge that he wasn't my biological grandfather. We all called him Philly. Like even my
Right.
dad and his brothers did. They didn't call him dad, but he was just remarkable. He was everything a granddad should be. And it's funny because if I'm talking about him now, I refer to him, bless him, he's not about anymore, but I refer to him as my granddad. And if I was saying to my mates, I'd be like, oh, yeah, sorry, I'm like, on Sunday, I'm not about, I'm going to my grand and granddad's for a roast or whatever. But to him, it would be Philly. But either way, he was my granddad. He was everything a granddad should be. Okay, I appreciate that's probably a little bit rarer, but in this modern era we're in, it's actually the old classic kind of husband, wife, 2.4 children is certainly in England, is actually now the minority. We live in a country and culture of blended families, step parents, whatever else. I can't think of any off the top of my head,
I
but
know
uh,
plenty.
yeah, both of my parents and both of my wife's parents were divorced and remarried, and that love was there for our step parents, our step brothers and siblings, sisters, and that. And like that's a lot more common, so people can draw upon that. And for me, I always had a really close bond with all of my nieces and nephews on my wife's side, particularly one of my nieces. She's God now like 14, but ever since she was born, we were just so close. And I was able to think, hang on, I have literally like first-hand experience of love that is not genetically bound. And I can make this joke because I'm from Devon, but I didn't marry someone that I don't love my wife, and I'm not. Sorry, I love my wife, but I'm not genetically related to her. But
Yeah.
I could, yeah. Some people in Devon need not apply, but it's so actually the answer is there. It's like I love so many people that I'm not genetically related to, and that is the evidence I was able to draw upon to go, actually, yeah, of course, love isn't dependent on a DNA link. And you start, and it takes a lot of work because you have to remove yourself from the first person, and you have to ask yourself questions that at this point, not just unborn, but unconceived child. You have to ask questions that they might ask 18, 20 years down the line. Why did you make that decision? Why did you do that? Why didn't you do this? And you have to take that third person view because it's a very complex route to parenthood. You, the donors, where are you going for open donors? Are you going anonymous? Are you, if down the line the kids want to like search for their biological father, what am I going to do? How am I going to react? You have to go through all this. It's complex and it's always ongoing. Like I'm in the honeymoon period now. They're 5, life's rosy. When they're teenagers and there's hormones are aging, and they go, "Oh, you're not my real dad." I'm not. I have to
So are they
mentally,
aware that you're not
yeah.
biologically the dad?
So
Right.
I mean, they're 5. How much
Yeah.
they can recite it, they can parrot it, but the advice now from all the professionals is to tell early and tell often, because a generation before us, my parents, if had they had gone through this, but their generation, they were told by the professionals, don't tell. There's no point. They'll never find out. Just keep it between you. That has led to this generation now, our generation and below, because those doctors, those psychologists, counselors, whatever else, they didn't know the internet was going to come with ancestry.com and at-home DNA test kits, how prevalent they would be. So there's this whole cohort of people finding out now unexpectedly. And part of my
Yeah, I can only imagine what it would be like to get to sort of 18, 20 years of age to then find out this massive piece of information.
Yeah, because genealogy is interesting. So people do it because they like. I had the same thing. Like when you do family trees, it's really interesting to go, oh wow, like I think sometimes we're always looking for some massive wealth there somewhere in the family, but it is interesting as well. And I've heard so part of my kind of journey into this acceptance, I started finding podcasts from donor conceived children who found out, and listening to them. And one of the most common things that I was hearing from these people who didn't know, who found out later in life, they all said, not, the common, like not all, but many of them said they were raised with so much love, but there was always this but. They always knew that there was something there. And I feel so, especially in the cases of where there's sperm donation and is on the male side, I feel so sorry for those blokes because they would have gone through all that stigma in a much different generation as well. So not even having the tools to look elsewhere, like the internet, for support, being very much kind of local based, as things were back then. And then on top of that, then they're having these kids and professionals are telling them, don't say anything. They don't need to know. Just so yeah, it's
some secret to keep for a lifetime, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, the stories I heard from those donor conceived children is like, oh, I have so much respect for my parents, what they went through, but then it feels like a bit of a betrayal because it's this lifelong secret that they weren't in, and then it starts the other questions like, well, who else in the family knows then? Who else has been keeping a secret from me? It's not so. Yeah, very.
I can imagine it splits the family up very quickly.
Yeah,
in some instances.
So I mentioned earlier, with my identity, having to strip it back and then reform those those layers like coats of armor. Essentially, best thing you can do with any children from a more complex route to parenthood is arm them with it, make it part of who they are and why they're so special and they're so longed for and what we did and didn't do. But I know it's romantic, but I truly believe that everything we went through, every fork in the road that we had to make a choice or one choice or another, every delay that we had a couple of really big delays that put us back best part of 8 months in total, one of them being lockdown, one of them being a medical thing on my wife's side. They were leading us to where we needed to go, to that donor, which was then going to take us to our kids.